Welcome to Translating Interview Speak, what your interviewer really wants to know. Chapter 4. We're Barbara Limmer and Laura Brown, and we've written the book on interview speak, and we want to help you get your next job. In today's video, you'll learn about Chapter 4, perseverance skills questions, failures, and negative situations questions, which can always be difficult. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what's the question behind these questions and how to answer them.
So the first negative question that we're going to cover is extremely common. It's tell me about one of your failures. And here's a sentence diagram. We have several of these in our book to help you really understand what specific words in the question mean. In this case, we're zeroing in on the word failures. You need to know that a failure does not have to be something major. In fact, it doesn't even have to be an actual failure. It can simply be something that did not work out as well as you had hoped. And remember to use the negative sandwich model, which we discussed in our first video. And what that is you start with something positive, then you briefly describe the negative, and you end on a positive. So let's translate that question. Here's what it really means. Are you someone who has both the confidence and the humility to admit that not everything in your life has worked out perfectly? Are you the kind of person who learns from failures? And in what ways are you a better candidate now that you've learned some important lessons? So, how do you answer this? Well, you describe a project from a past job or perhaps even your current job that did not work out as well as you had hoped. Give the context for the project, what you did, what the result was, and say why that result wasn't as stellar as you thought it would be. Here's the important part. You then state what you learned from it and what you do differently now. It's extremely important to get beyond just your own head. A lot of people just say what they learned. Okay, well, how does that translate into action? So that second part is extremely important. What do you do differently now? And what you're doing here is you're demonstrating how you will be a tremendous asset to this employer now that you've gone through that experience. So here's another negative question. What was the most useful criticism you ever received? Let's break this down. So let's start with the word useful. What do we mean by that? Well, it means that it had an effect, that you changed your behavior after receiving that criticism. Criticism, what does that word mean? Well, it doesn't mean fault or blame or disapproval. It refers to constructive feedback about something that you could improve. And the end of this question, what was the most useful criticism you ever received? What does that word received mean? Well, be sure to describe something that you were told by someone with whom you had a good relationship, preferably a mentor or manager. That means you were told this constructive criticism from someone you trust. So let's translate the actual question. Here's what it really means. Are you someone who can take criticism, learn from it, and ultimately change your behavior? So how do you answer this question? Well, choose something that you were given feedback on from a prior boss, a mentor, or even a trusted colleague. Describe it in a neutral way without emotion. It is what it is. Here's what you were told. Give specifics on what you were told and how you reacted. Say how you took the information and worked on it until you improved. And here's the kicker, share what you do differently now as a result of that feedback.
Let's talk about another negative question. Give an example of a situation where you had to think on your feet to get yourself out of a difficult situation. So here's what the person is really asking you. They're thinking, we need someone who can react quickly and who is able to handle unexpected situations, maybe with customers, colleagues, or leaders. So they're thinking, tell me about a time when you were successful in dealing with that kind of situation. So how do you answer it? Well, again, going back to preparation, you want to have some examples of times when you had to react quickly to solve a problem or answer questions that you hadn't expected. Describe the situation and what made it difficult or delicate. And so let me just make a point here that because you're familiar with the situation, you might really understand why it was tricky or why it was tough, but that might not be clear to the other person. So you may have to clearly explain why in that situation it was a problem because you don't want to make them guess as to why. And then after you make sure that you explain that, then describe what you did or said to rectify the situation and then how it worked out favorably in the end. Here's another question. What can you tell me about yourself that best illustrates your personal drive and motivation? And let's go back to the three things that interviewers care about. They care, can you do the job? Are you motivated and excited about this job? And will you fit in? And so they really want to know that you have some motivation to do this job. So the translation is, we need someone in this job who is highly driven and self-motivated. So tell me a story that shows me you fit that description. And how you answer. Well, first of all, you can think about this as building a little rapport by sharing something either professionally or personally. Now, this is interesting. Most of the time we talk about come up with a professional example, but this is a good place where you can come up with a personal side of your life. Maybe when you were playing sports or a different hobby, or maybe a situation where you were facing some adversity. And so you can share a story outside of work that shows how you kept going. So discuss how you stayed positive and motivated to succeed despite the difficult circumstances. Describe what you did then and what you still do to manage emotions and retain a positive outlook. So again, it all comes down to how you use that to be a better person now. So you want to show how you're a better candidate now because you went through that experience. And so you will be a better employee for this company. So those are some key questions from Chapter 4. What's next with Chapter 5? We're going to talk about leadership, hiring, and motivation skills questions. We're going to help you to understand questions about leadership and management and hiring and motivating staff. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like and share this, and don't forget, you can get that 40% discount at our publisher, Manning.com, with code InterviewHelp. See you at the next video. Bye.